Welcome back to Serious Talk, where we cut through the hype and get practical about agentic AI for business leaders and builders. I'm your host, Greg Banks. Thanks for coming along with us today. Over the last year, AI has moved at a breakneck pace. New models, new tools, and new frameworks seemingly every week. For many organizations, that pace made it nearly impossible to commit to a direction without worrying it would be outdated before implementation even started. But things are starting to stabilize just a bit, and that's opened the door for deeper, more strategic conversations. In this episode, I'm joined by Tim and Gavin as we break down three of the most important agent frameworks in the market today: LangChain, Pydantic AI, and the Anthropic Agent SDK. We'll compare where each one shines, where it struggles, and how business and technical leaders should think about choosing the right framework for the right agent. If you're evaluating agentic AI initiatives, building custom agents, or trying to avoid costly architectural mistakes, this episode will give you clarity, confidence, and practical direction. Thanks for coming along. Let's jump right in. Tim and Gavin, welcome back. Serious Talk Agentic AI series. Good to pick the ball up and run with this again. Good to have you here today.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. Looking forward to it.
Good to be back.
All right, so the news cycle was just absolutely insane 6 months ago. I think not the last 3 or 4 months, but prior to that, everything about everything seemed to be changing every day. Like, it would be really, really difficult for businesses to make decisions. By the time you choose and engage, the stuff has changed. It seems some of that has settled down, and as that has happened, it allows us to get deeper and get a better understanding for some of the products and frameworks that are out there. And today we want to dive into what we believe to be the top 3 frameworks. Gavin, why don't you talk about what 3 we're going to dig into and any just kind of summary before we start out?
Yeah, so we're going to be diving into Anthropic's Agent SDK, so a specific framework designed by Anthropic and supported around their Claude code and Claude models. We're also going to be diving into Pydantic AI, which I think is a little bit more of a user-friendly, beginner-friendly AI framework built on Python. And then we're going to be covering LangChain, which is really the user, or I would say the industry standard historically for building out AI agents. So this is probably the most used and most widely distributed model. So we're going to be comparing all 3 of those and going over different business use cases that they can be applied to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what we wanted to make clear for our listeners as well is, like, there's a lot of different frameworks out there. And again, I know you said things are settling down a little bit, Greg, in terms of changes, but it still is changing pretty significantly as well, even if it seems a little bit slower than before. So there's new frameworks always coming out as well. But we think these 3 are pretty representative of kind of the different options that are out there. So, and then these 3 are kind of the 3 that are our main go-tos when we have to build custom AI agents ourselves. So, I think speaking from our experience as well, these are the 3 we find ourselves coming back to the most for different use cases. So, yeah, excited to dive into these. I think each one of these could warrant its own episode and deep dive of when it's a good fit, when to use it, why to use it, how to best implement it, etc. But really wanted this to kind of be more of a survey to kind of give people a taste of what's out there in terms of, if they've decided as a business they want to build a custom AI agent, what's kind of representative of the frameworks out there, and what are some key things that they need to look for to execute that agent effectively. And so I guess, Gavin, I think to start out is, like, why even have an agent framework? If we're building a custom agent with custom code, like, why wouldn't we just go ahead and start from scratch?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, and this has occurred historically across almost any form of development that's been released or iterated upon throughout coding historically, right? So you want to be leveraging the foundational frameworks that have been put in place in order to accomplish specific tasks. It's going to accelerate your development, and it's going to be something that you're able to communicate with other communities on. And if you get stuck, if you need, maybe you need to download a package or something that's reusable from other communities, that's really where these framework strengths come into play. And I would almost view them like a less typed, less strong programming language in a sense. This is kind of the groundwork and foundation for, well, why would we use Java? Why would we use C++? Why would we use JavaScript? I think from agent frameworks, you can accomplish almost any task with any framework. You're not going to be locked into, you're not going to be incapable of building any AI agent with any of these frameworks, but they are designed and tailored to do very specific types of agents. And you're going to be able to build them quicker, more reliable, more efficient if you choose the right framework. So just like choosing a programming language with less severe severity, that's how I would imagine frameworks.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good call out. And I think a lot of people get really focused on like, okay, what model do I need to use for my agent? Like underneath, but really the models can get swapped out pretty easily. The hardest piece to swap out once you start an agent is going to be your framework. So it is an important decision on an agent by agent basis. I think another misnomer is like, okay, if I'm going to go start building my AI agent architecture around, the Pydantic AI agent framework, that all my agents have to use that framework. That's a misnomer. Like you really have to decide your framework on an agent by agent basis. And then there's a lot of protocols to have agents speak to each other. So you could use Anthropic Agent SDK for one agent and then use a Pydantic AI framework for another agent in your architecture. And that's going to be totally fine. There's different protocols in platforms now that can help those talk together where that doesn't become as much of an issue. And I think the other piece people always ask too is like, okay, what am I paying for a framework? Like, what does it cost me? Well, what's interesting is most companies are taking the approach where most of these frameworks are open source frameworks available on GitHub. A lot of these companies are maybe selling products that are adjacent to or dependent within the framework. So like Pydantic AI, you can use that. It's an open source framework that you can leverage and build off of. Same with LangChain. They both offer adjacent products that you can purchase for your agent evals or for hosting, right? But the frameworks themselves is not going to be a factor for your cost of your agent. And then obviously with like Anthropic Agent SDK, it only works with Anthropic models. So your associate cost there would be the model cost with Anthropic, but not for the framework itself. So want to just kind of call that out as well. All of these are available open source and you can go build off of these frameworks, move forward, and they're all getting continuously updated by each of the framework providers. But yeah, maybe we want to start with LangChain. That's kind of like the longest standing framework. They've been around since AI agents really started becoming a thing a couple years ago. So it's probably the most established. Let's start with LangChain, what it is, and when should businesses really look to leverage that? What are some key considerations there?
Yeah, so when you think about LangChain, really think about the most open source of open source possibilities, right? So there is so much support online for LangChain because of how long it's been around. There is a ton of reusable tools and assets that people have built. LangChain is really, really powerful whenever you're building out an agent with a strong ecosystem. So it's really great at doing agent to agent communication, and it actually has memory built into the framework, rather than using external sources for memory, like a database to store memory chunks. So LangChain is really good at agent-to-agent communication, really strong community backing. One of the downsides of LangChain, I would say, is I don't think it's very beginner-friendly. I don't think it's the most simplistic thing to jump into, because the strength of being large in the community is also its weakness. There's just a ton of stuff to sort through. And it's almost as if you're going through the classic Stack Overflow sites, trying to find the right answer, and you're just having to wade through all of these various different things that people have built. With agents being so new and AI in general being so new, people have built things that worked months ago that really aren't even applicable today. And I think that's really where some people are going to struggle with LangChain, but you're going to be able to accomplish nearly anything with this model. But it's really, really good when you need RAG. RAG's a big one. So there's a lot of business use cases that might benefit directly if you're trying to interact with documents with a user in a chat interface.
Yep. I think longest standing has the most pre-built kind of components, the biggest community, but definitely has a steeper learning curve to it as well, to really try to get use out of it. And I think LangChain's biggest challenge over the last year has been updating their frameworks to keep pace with the amount of change, because they were just more established when a lot of new capabilities have been coming out. And they've been doing a good job with that, but I think just expect there, like you said, to be more of a learning curve there to keep pace. But you're going to have a very robust framework that works across a large number of use cases. Like it's going to be really hard to kind of hit the limits of that framework based on your use case. So a really, really solid option. So then that takes us to the next one that we actually leverage a lot ourselves if we want a model agnostic agent framework, and that's PydanticAI. And maybe we want to walk through that one a little bit.
Yeah. So the power of Pydantic AI is it takes a little bit of the autonomy away from the AI itself. So you're working on a Python, base, and it works to essentially say, this is what the expected input is, this is what the expected output is. So that's really powerful. So it allows you to have some structure to your AI communications. This is really useful in business cases when you want to analyze emails, tickets, meeting notes, things like that. So you can take a structured JSON. Pydantic is really good at taking that, formatting that into an expected output. It's also model agnostic. So that's really nice as models come out. You don't necessarily want to be tied down all the time. And like you had said previously, when you're building out agents, models is actually something that's pretty easy to switch out. It's really just a difference of what API key and URL you're calling at the end of the day. So that is really nice. And then it leverages some of the core principles we've been talking about really well. Pydantic AI has really aligned itself to agentic building, things like tools, sub-agents, skills. Its model is structured very smoothly around those concepts.
Yeah, and I think it's just very Pythonic in the way it's created or the framework's made as well. So if you're used to working within and with Python a lot, it's a really solid framework to use too. It's going to be really familiar to you and something you're going to be able to kind of jump in with very low levels of learning curve to apply to a lot of different use cases. Again, I think the community here around Pydantic AI is probably not quite as well established. So Pydantic AI is a great framework, has a lot of capabilities right out of the gate. But, compared to LangChain, you might need to build, if you're bolting on things around it. The advantage is it's a very modular framework and it's easy to bolt things on, but you might have to build things yourself. You're not going to have as much pre-built components from community members that you could kind of build off of there. But model agnostic too.
I was looking over the artifact, and on LangChain, you specifically called out it supported multi-language LLM. And I got to think for bigger companies, a lot of global call centers, things like that, multi-language is really important. I know when call transcription came out, that was a huge problem. Took the industry a while to kind of work that knowledge up. Is that a thing that's only in LangChain? I don't see it mentioned specifically in this artifact, but is multi-language a big part of that decision?
It's definitely something that LangChain can support, and there are modules out there that support that. One of the things to keep in mind is all of these frameworks can do that task,
okay,
right? They can support multi-language. LangChain just has things that are pre-existing within it to help, that process establish foundation within your system.
Again, I'm sure their longevity has something to do with that. They've had time to work some of that stuff out. All right, just wanted to clarify.
Yeah. And so then that kind of leads us to the third framework that we use pretty consistently here. That's Anthropic Agent SDK. I think that's probably the one we've used the most internally right now in terms of the use cases that we're doing. Yeah, tell us a little bit about Anthropic Agent SDK and kind of what makes it a little bit different than the other two we've already looked at.
Yeah, I might be a little biased on this, but this is my preferred SDK, is what I prefer to work with. The biggest downside to Anthropic Agent SDK is it's designed to work with Anthropic's models. So it's LLM locked in. If you're looking to develop agents, though, I would not be super scared from that point of view, mainly because you're going to want to leverage different LLMs based off of the various different problems you're trying to solve from a cost perspective more so than anything else. You want to use lower LLMs when prompts that are being provided or the problem you're trying to solve doesn't require all of that power. So I would definitely have your overall ecosystem be LLM agnostic. That's why it doesn't scare me so much to see a framework that relies on one LLM, because I can build other agents that don't fit this framework with different LLMs. But this tool in particular is built by Anthropic. So its MCP support it's built around the concept of MCPs. Anthropic built the Model Context Protocol, so it has native MCP support. The other thing with Anthropic, what it does incredibly well is it's all about autonomy of the agent. So this framework works incredibly well for scenarios where you want an agent to analyze something autonomously, maybe not triggered by chat, and you want it to evaluate various different tools in your system, various different sources of information to deliver value somewhere, whether it's creating records or tickets or trying to solve things autonomously. This is where Anthropic's Agent SDK really comes into play.
And I think it's worth mentioning, like Anthropic's Agent SDK is the harness around that makes Claude Code. And this is open source. So you're essentially using the same harness and framework that's powering Claude Code and Claude Cowork, which are, in my opinion, the best agents on the market today in terms of being able to do long running complex tasks. So you really open up the ability too with this agent framework for your agents to be able to do and code and compute itself, which opens up a lot of possibilities as well. So I think just the skills framework as well, like you can do skills with PydanticAI, but skills is going to work right out of the box with Anthropic. So you're able to be very deterministic in your processes and then do progressive disclosure to other systems, meaning you don't have to bring everything into context all at once. So Anthropic's really been leading the charge, I think, in terms of agent capabilities. I think one of our number one recommended resources, if you always want to be on the cutting edge of agent capabilities, go follow Anthropic's engineering blog if you haven't already. But as of right now, they're on the leading edge and everybody's kind of implementing what they're coming out with a month or two after and copying Anthropic. So, again, things are always changing in the space. But, if you want to build around the most kind of cutting edge in terms of capability, for a framework. Right now it's Anthropic Agent SDK, but that just comes at the cost of you're tied to Anthropic's models and LLMs.
Yeah, I will say it's possible that they'll expand LLM capabilities in the future to be outside of the Anthropic's designated LLMs. But when we're talking about wanting to expand your company into the future, what do things really look like in 5 years from now when agents are more realized? The companies that are going to get the most out of agents are those that look to automate as much as possible. Human in the loop is great. There are definitely areas where it's absolutely needed, but your real value drivers are going to be the ones that are sitting in the background, your value driving agents, and solving problems for you because they get to work all the time. They're not working when humans are working.
Yeah, definitely. And so I think at the end of the day that our takeaway here for people is, well, if you're looking at frameworks, it really depends on a few key things. We always like kind of leaving business leaders with a couple key takeaways to maybe apply to their specific use cases that you might be looking at. And so in terms of kind of quick rules of thumb, Gavin, if you're trying to give advice to somebody looking and surveying different frameworks out there and they're looking at these three, again, we can apply these lessons to other frameworks as well. What are maybe some kind of key takeaways that you'd want people to walk away with?
Yeah, key takeaways are Pydantic AI is something that it's really typed, right? So you want it to ingest something that's really structured, output something that's really structured, really good for evaluating structured data, just like Python has been for years. Let's evaluate the structured data, allow the agent to do something with it, and then provide a solid output. LangChain is whenever you have lots of tools, lots of knowledge sources, you want a super structured workflow that can communicate across a bunch of different agents. LangChain might be more of your speed. And then Anthropic, that's really where you want autonomous delegation. So you're able to have that agent run, it's evaluating things within your system, and it is able to do things without human in the loop. I will say too, just like at the beginning, all of these frameworks can accomplish these things. It's just about picking the tool that is going to give you the best head start. And when evaluating other agent frameworks outside of this one, things that you want to keep in mind are what are the out of the box things that are going to work? Is this something that has MCP capabilities out of the box? Is this something that works really well with skills? Is this something that understands RAG, or do I have to build all of that custom into the framework? You also want to be evaluating, am I large language model locked like Anthropic? Do I have the capability to go out and look at all the various different language models on the market if the best changes week to week? And the third thing I would be looking at is what is the community support? How much has already been done here? How much can I reutilize? How many people in the world or in wherever it is you're hiring will have this skill set compared to some of the other ones? That's something that's important to think about as well when you're building out a large team or foundation of AI agents.
Gavin, that's an incredible wrap up here. And Tim and Nancy did an episode a few weeks ago. We talked about custom build versus out of the box. And one of the things we highlighted was the takeaway cost wise was not as big as you would think. And there's a lot of that goes into that. But inevitably, if you're going the custom build route, there's a lot of layers on this onion, right? There's a lot of decisions got to be made and a lot of research. What we're trying to do here is break these down and go a little bit deeper on some of those on the custom build side. I know Gavin's going to do an artifact soon on the just really breaking down the architecture a little bit more. So this is a great front end of that, just really understanding the model you start with. And if, to Tim's point, if you don't make this decision right early, the pain that inevitably may come later if you have to switch it out might be a little bit more. So just want to try and bring some clarity to that. Great job, gentlemen. Any other closing thoughts on this topic? Any other takeaways you want to refer people to?
I think just don't let perfection be the enemy of progress when you're making some of these decisions as well. So, look at the big picture here. Understand you can go different frameworks, agent to agent. You're not committing yourselves to your whole architecture with a single framework. And hey, iterate and improve. Like this, the rules for development, haven't changed. So pick something based on what you know, go with it, see what works, and maybe you got to swap out and move another framework in down the road. But at the end of the day, the best way to learn and adapt is to continue making progress forward and deliver business value for your organization. So I think a lot of people can get paralysis analysis when they're looking at tools or frameworks, et cetera. I think one of the key takeaways we want to share is it is an important decision, but also the most important decision is just executing and delivering business value and then continuing to iterate and improve over time.
Gentlemen, thank you both for this. We will attach this artifact to the show notes, but thank y'all for your time today. Appreciate it.
Yeah, have a good one. Thanks, Greg.
Thanks.
Take care. That wraps up today's episode of Serious Talk. We know how very valuable your time is, so thanks again for spending your time with us. If you found this episode helpful, make sure to follow or subscribe to the show wherever you listen, and we'd love if you'd leave a review. It really helps more leaders find the show. And if you know a business leader or a technical team struggling with how to implement Agentic AI the right way, share this episode with them. Be sure to check out the show notes for links and resources we mentioned today, along with recommended content to go deeper on agent frameworks and architecture. If you have questions or want to continue the conversation, reach out to us anytime at SeriousTalk@SeriousSolutions.com. And a special thank you to Jason Fowler for allowing us use of his song, Mystery Road. Until next time, keep moving forward and keep building real business value with AI.